Kenya Beyond 2017. What a beauty Kenya is. The equator cuts across our country almost on a 50-50 basis, giving what many people would consider the most ideal climate on the planet. 42 distinct language groups in one nation. We look like we are 4 different countries in terms of the experience you have here, the grandeur of the land, the climate, the weather conditions, like 4 nations packaged into one. The coastal region, the highlands, the lake region, and the northern frontier. Our coastline attracts people from all over the world. Diani Beach in particular is one of the most sourced beaches around the world. And so is the Marine Beach, Mombasa Marine Beach, and the Coral Garden. Anzu Beach, the scenic scenes of Lamu, the mangrove forests, the prime land along our coastline, the white sands. When you go up a little bit, you find the Savo, then the Aboseli, the best site for viewing Mount Kilimanjaro. For your information, Mount Kilimanjaro is not just the highest peak in Africa, but the highest freestanding mountain on the face of the earth. Further up, you meet this great city, the city of Nairobi, the only city on the planet with a national park in it. You can take a walk there when you want to relax right from the city on the Nairobi Safari Walk, and you're going to have a panoramic view of the ecology of the entire ecosystem of the national park. Further north, we have the great Mount Kenya, from which this nation is named, the only mountain on the earth along the equator that is snowy at the peak. Further north, we have the Meru National Park, and then in the northwest, we have the Saburu, the Buffalo Springs, and the Shaba. On the leeward side, we have the conservancy known as Olpajeta, and further southwest, the Aberdares. Going further west, we have the Great Rift Valley, the largest rift valley on the face of the earth, many water bodies, rivers, lakes inhabited by the pink flamingos. How much more can I tell you about the Chulu Hills, the Kisumu Impala Sanctuary, and Lake Victoria, the largest water body in Africa, the second largest freshwater lake on the face of the earth, and the very source of the longest river on this planet. Then we have the Masai Mara, and now I understand that the wildebeest migration is considered one of the world wonders. What a beauty Kenya is. We have some of the best biodiversity and phosphor and salt, and now there are traces of commercial gold in western Kenya, enough gas and oil in Turkana and other parts of northern Kenya. This nation is blessed with agriculture. If you didn't know, we are the largest black tea exporter on the face of the earth, and the 4th largest tea exporter overall, lagging behind Sri Lanka, India, and China. The second most traded commodity on earth is coffee, and Kenya prized to having 7 of the best coffee factories matters taste. Our coffee has been a perennial favorite for coffee connoisseurs. When you look at our cut flowers, we are the 4th largest on the face of the earth. The Kenyan story cannot be complete without mentioning athletics. 800 meters, 1500 meters, marathon. When our young men and women join those stadiums, the world waits in earnest expectation, knowing they are going to hoist our flag and sing our national anthem, because those gallant young men and women never disappoint. And of late, our rugby team is setting shivers around the world, and so is Julius Yego, the javelin thrower. What a beauty Kenya is. We have made a lot of gains since independence. In 1963, we were 8.9 million people. The estimate as at 2017 is 47 million people. We had a life expectancy of 48 years. Today, the average lifespan of a Kenyan is 63.4 years, above the Africa average of 58.6. We have reduced infant mortality from 179 deaths to 39 deaths for 1,000 children born, doing far better than the global average of 42. We've been able to reduce HIV prevalence from 10% in the 90s to 6% today. Matters economy. We have, as at last year, 5 trillion shillings changed hands in Kenya. And Business Monitor Intelligence estimates 8.7 trillion shilling will be changing hands by 2020. Guess what? Our GDP was 13.3 billion US, and it has grown to 63.3 billion US by 2013, according to World Bank. World Bank further suggests that our per capita then was 104 US. As per 2013, it was 1,245 US. And that's the reason they declared us in 2015 a lower middle income earner, because the benchline is 1,036 US. We are still the largest economy in East Africa with an annual budget of 2.7 trillion Kenya shilling. And many business commentators describe Kenya as one of Africa's lion economies. Matters economy. We've made some progress. Education, in 1963, 840,000 students were enrolled in primary school. That was about 35% of the then age group, with only 10,593 that year enrolling in high schools. In 2017 in Kenya, we expect 1.5 million students to sit for their national examinations, KCPE, with over 70% translating into high school. In 1970, we had one chartered university in Kenya, the University of Nairobi. Today, we have 48 chartered universities, 22 public and 26 private. Just in 2012, we had about 71% mobile phone subscribers. Today, we have 88% mobile phone subscribers, the highest in Africa. And guess what? We introduced to the world the innovation of transferring money through the phone, the M-Pesa concept. That was an original concept from Kenya that has transformed the industry. It has shifted the financial sector on the planet. No doubt we have made a lot of gains as a nation. That said, we have a lot of issues as a country. While our population is almost 5 times the independence population, our large size has remained the same, 581,309 square kilometers. And some of us in Kenya own thousands of acres, while hundreds of thousands are squatters in their own land. Matters health, we spend a meager 6% of our budget on health, lower than any of our neighboring nations. We still have less than 20 doctors for every 100,000 Kenyans living. And only 25% of Kenyans have either a public, private, or even a community-based insurance health scheme. 75% of Kenyans are exposed when they are sick or when they are hospitalized. Guess what? By 1980, the US dollar changed to the Kenya shilling at 7.41. Today, the US dollar to the Kenya shilling is changing at 103. While we have made a lot of progress in education, UNESCO says that we still have 1 million children who are not in school, especially in the slums in the urban areas and in our northern frontier. The government of Kenya last month admitted that 2.7 Kenyans are in acute food shortage, especially in Isiolo and Saburu and Baringo, Elgeyo Marakwet, Turkana, Marsabit, Madera, Wajir, Garissa, Tana River, and Kilifi counties. You know, Ghana was able to reduce the undernourished people from 7 million to 1 million from 1990 to 2004, and they employed only 3 strategies. First, market opening, market access for smallholder growers. Secondly, they gave incentives to enhance food production. And thirdly, they enhanced the road network into the farming areas. That was the miracle. That was the magic there. At the meantime, we still encourage pastoralism in Kenya for political expediency. But we cannot discuss issues about this country and ignore the main elephant in the room, corruption. You see, a survey done by audit firm PricewaterhouseCoopers on economic crimes indicated that Kenya is the third most corrupt nation on the face of the earth. In the financial year 2011-2012, then PS Ministry of Finance, Joseph Kenya, said, a third of our budget is lost to corruption. Let me interrogate that statement. Then our budget was 1.5 trillion shilling, meaning a third lost to corruption is 500 billion shillings. What can we do with 500 billion shillings? Let me tell you 4 things. The superhighway was estimated at 30 billion shillings. With 500 billion shillings, we could have done 16 superhighways per year, not in 3 years, per year. What can 500 billion shillings do? Number 2, the estimated cost for the Darkway Water project that is supposed to do 3 things: supply water, hydroelectricity, and irrigation, mainly in Kitui and Makueni counties, but also parts of Machakos all the way up to the Konza Tech City, is estimated at 60 billion shillings. 500 billion shillings could have constructed 8 such mega dams, and I believe that would have reduced poverty and food shortage and enhanced the economic power, not only of those counties, but in Kenya in general. What can 500 billion do? From Mombasa to Nairobi, the cost of SGR, standard gauge railway line, is 327 billion. That doesn't exhaust the kitty. If we took the stretch, the 120-kilometer stretch from Nairobi to Naivasha, that would cost the country 150 billion. If I add that 327, that gives me 477 billion. It still does not exhaust what is lost to corruption every single year. So I suggest, well, that's a mega project. With the money lost to corruption every year, we can do a railway line from Mombasa to slightly past Naivasha, not in 10 years, but every single year. What can 500 billion shillings do? Let me tell you the 4th thing. When we launched the slum upgrade program and we piloted it in Kibera, it cost us 6.5 billion to put up 3,072 houses. If I take 500 billion at the same rate, I would build 236,307 housing units. Let me tell you more. We have 2.5 million people who live in the slums of Nairobi. All other things being equal, using the same BQs, we would eradicate the housing crisis in 10.5 years. There is no doubt anyone in his right frame of mind can notice the development taking place in Kenya. But I submit to you tonight, that's a meager percent of our true potential. It has nothing to do with the potential this country has. We have tried to address these issues over the years. We have recognized that these issues are grounded on governance and democracy. We have realized that the situation in Kenya is because of the favorite few taking advantage of the languishing millions. And the first attempt to address our governance issues goes back to 1952, when a bloody insurgency rose against white settler. And that made the white settlers lock in the so-called or the famous Kapeguria 6, Jomo Kenyatta, Acheng Oneko, Bildad Kegia, Fred Kubai, Kongo Karuba. And immediately a state of emergency was declared. And in 1958, all the black people elected in large corps walked out of the chambers when Sir Evelyn Berlin refused to do constitutional amendments. But our people never gave up. That intensified, and between 1960 and 1963, they negotiated what is known as the Lancaster Constitution, or what we call today the Independence Constitution. KANU, the ruling party, negotiated with KADU. Let me refresh your memory for the sake of the students in our midst. KANU is Kenya African National Union, and KADU is Kenya African Democratic Union. They marched together and paved way to a de facto one-party nation. Shortly, our very first president, Jomo Kenyatta, fell out with Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, the vice president, and the latter formed KPU, Kenya People's Union. But that was short-lived and banned by the government of the day, and the leaders were detained. In 1982, our second president, Daniel Arap Moi, reviewed the constitution, making Kenya a one de jure party state to forestall the registration of a political party by Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and George Moseti Anyona. But unfortunately, on the 1st of August that year, that might be the darkest hour in the history of this country, a coup d'etat was attempted, but faced by a very ruthless crush from loyalist soldiers. But that made the Moi regime to undertake a protracted crackdown on Mwakenya and any other voice of dissent. Between 1982 and 1988, we had the Mlolongo queuing voting system that rigged out very famous and very renowned politicians. This gave rise to the Saba Saba movement in 1990. Many protesters were arrested, some were maimed, and many were killed, but they stayed the course. And this made President Moi to bow down and repeal Section 2A of our Constitution, and thereby restoring multi-party politics in Kenya. But a divided opposition lost to KANU in the 1992 elections. But it made them go back to the drawing table and realize the need to level the electioneering ground. But that never happened until in the year 2002, when the opposition learned their mistakes. They came together under National Rainbow Coalition, and for the very first time, KANU was ousted out of power, and President Kibaki was inaugurated into power. One of his promises was to deliver a new constitution within 100 days. That never came to pass. And because we never addressed historical injustices, the elections that came in the year 2007, December, ushered the worst ethnic cleansing in the history of Kenya. So bad that we had to be reconciled by foreigners. A panel of eminent Africans led by Kofi Annan came to broker the peace deal, and a coalition government was formed, but they delivered the constitution we were looking for on 27th of August, 2010. The best gainers, or rather the main gainers of CK 2010 were the marginalized counties, especially the northern frontier, that had little access to the resources that were in Nairobi. So resources were devolved, and 47 devolved units came out of that. One would have expected, after taking power closer to the people, one would have expected, after taking resources closer to the people, is that the real issues that we were dealing with as a country, three of them, illiteracy, disease, and poverty, would have been addressed by the devolved units. But regrettably, fellow Kenyans, we devolved corruption into 48 units, if you include the national government. I remember I warned that in my book. I launched a book on 4th of March 2011, known as The Formation of a County Government in Kenya. And I remember warning this nation, we invited many leaders, that we are likely to devolve corruption. Right now, what we're witnessing is unprecedented in the history of this nation, the runaway corruption. I know for a fact that the Constitution of Kenya 2010 is by far the most progressive document we have ever heard. So I believe with all my heart, what we're witnessing in Kenya today reveals a deeper problem that cannot be addressed by documents and laws and systems. The human heart, the condition of the human heart. No government schemes and strategy can reform the hearts of men. As far as today is concerned, democracy still presents the best option for governing free people. But democracy cannot be attained overnight. Democratic ideals are a slow ripening fruit. Any idea for drastic changes to fix the systems overnight is based on the ambitions of an individual, not the common good of a nation. I'll never forget, in the year 2003, then Justice Minister Honorable Kiraito Murungi declared a surgical cleanup of the judiciary, a radical surgery of the judicial system. And not so long after that, he was made to eat a humble pie, because change is a gradual process. Deep-rooted cultural issues cannot be changed overnight. It's a slow ripening fruit. And a case in point, there was a lot of tension in Rwanda between 1990 and 1993. So much that international pressure on the Hutu-led government compelled them to go to the drawing table in Arusha with the Rwandese Patriotic Front. But on 6th of April 1994, someone shot down a plane that carried the Rwandese president, Juvenal Habyarimana, the Rwandan president, Juvenal Habyarimana, and the Burundian president, Cyprien Ntaryamira. And apparently this took place when the plane was in the airspace of President Habyarimana. That assassination immediately ended the Arusha Accords. What ensued in the next 100 days, that inferno will better live in infamy. 800,000 people were killed and 2 million people displaced, and the only condition for your death was your tribe. I repeat, democracy is a slow ripening fruit. Any drastic measure to change systems, as they did in Rwanda, never works. You know, while I admit that they have made a lot of economic progress in Rwanda under the presidency of Paul Kagame, the real issues that took them to genocide, governance and democracy, still remain elusive in Rwanda today. What is true for Rwanda is true for Uganda and many African nations. Democracy can't be coerced down the throats of humanity. Compare and contrast the story of Rwanda with what happened in the United States this year on 20th of January. The popular candidate lost, and she was leading by a whopping 2.8 million votes. But their electoral laws declared Donald Trump the president based on electoral colleges. In essence, what that implies is that majority of Americans were not for President Donald Trump. Perhaps they were fearing drastic changes with this gentleman. Whatever the reason, we all know that we never witnessed bloodshed in the U.S. We didn't see them heaping blame on this race or that tribe or this class. They have lived to fight another day. They have chosen to give him a chance to see what will become out of the Trump presidency. I wonder what would have happened in Kenya if a popular president was declared the loser. Although our system is fundamentally different, and I'm not ignorant of the same, the best way to answer that question is to go back to history, because history does not cheat. We only need to look back what happened in 2007 when there was a dispute in presidential elections. Over 1,000 lives were killed. 500,000 people were systematically displaced, courtesy of a stolen election. We are seeing the same narrative quickly building up in Kenya today. To refresh your memory, then there was a slogan, 42 verses 1. Now it's becoming verses 2. The same tension, the same political undertones and tribal connotations are quickly building up. And this is the reason we convened this forum tonight. I believe, while there are many reasons why we didn't fight in the year 2013, the single most important human factor was the ICC phenomenon. Neither political side knew what would become of the ICC discourse, and they watched it from the distance. But now ICC is out of the way. It has lost savor in the eyes of many Kenyans. You see, the UN sat down in Rome on 17th of July 1998, and they formed the very first permanent criminal court, ICC. This was inspired by the need for universal justice. This was inspired to quell violence and to protect the weak that are harassed by the mighty. But while we even enacted 17th of July and recognized it as World Day for International Justice, ladies and gentlemen, today as I speak to you, crimes against humanity know no bounds. Great nations refuse to ratify the Rome Statute. Powerful people in high places have committed atrocities widespread across the world, and they have walked scot-free. They have even funded or incited or even prepared the ground for crimes against humanity. So ICC, to the eyes of many in the developing world, has practiced what I call selective justice. The Kenyan cases in particular have made many Kenyans question the professionalism, integrity, impartiality of ICC in investigation, prosecution, and execution of justice. Now with ICC out of the way, where does Kenya peg her hope? Because now our destiny is square in our hands in this election. Is there justice in Kenya? And if so, justice for who? Because petty offenders in this nation are arrested, and the arresting officer in many cases is both the prosecutor and the judge, and for a few hours, the prisoner. If you steal 1,000 shillings in Kenya, we jail you. If you steal 1 billion shillings, we protect you. If you kill one person, we imprison you for life. If you kill 1,000 people, we crown you our king. Injustice is not a new phenomenon in the world. Asaph laments in Psalm 75, why do the wicked continue to thrive? Where is justice? I found the answer in Acts 17, 30 and 31. I paraphrase for you tonight. That God doesn't judge us immediately. He gives us an opportunity to repent. So the question is no longer universal. It gets personal. The day of judgment is coming. Are you personally ready for it? When there are disputes in presidential elections, we normally have two contrasting ideologies in Kenya. On one hand, there are those of us who feel we should make use of the existing legal institutions. We should utilize our established institutions. We have made them, we should trust them, and we should take our cases to the courts. Then on the other hand, are the people who feel there is no justice in our courts. So they explore street justice, trying to coerce what I call a political settlement, because they don't trust our court system. That being the case, brothers and sisters, fellow Kenyans, what is our recourse? What options do we have in our hands tonight? In the Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire describes 3 levels of awareness. The lowest level, he calls it the magic level. These are people who believe they are destined for fate. There is nothing they can do about their situation. The graph is already drawn. The gods have chosen their destiny. They accept it as given. And that's the lot of almost 65% of the lower echelons in this nation's economic ladder. Then there's the second level of awareness, which is known as the naive level. These are people like you who know exactly what is happening, but we prefer to watch things from a distance, from the screens, at the comfort of our houses. This presents the working class in this country. We don't want to get into the murky waters of reforms. Then there's the third level and the highest level. Paulo Freire calls it the critical level. These are transformative leaders. People who believe I am the change that I want to see in the world. I paraphrase from Mahatma Gandhi. Be the change that you want to see in the world. Words that were put in a different way by Mother Teresa. If you cannot feed 1,000, at least feed a soul. I don't believe it's your lot or duty or fate or responsibility to fix the evil system on this planet. You don't live in history where all evil has its root, but you surely can do something during your time. Martin Luther King Jr., when he initially started the civil rights movement, he was castigated by his own people, rejected by the church where he used to preach, but they now honor him to the extent they have preserved the third Monday of every January in his honor and erected a statue to his tribute in Washington, D.C. Guess what? One black woman seated in a bus was told to give way for white passengers. She refused. She simply said, "My feet hurt." Her name is Rosa Parks. She was kicked out of the bus, broke her leg, and that single act of courage made an entire people stand up and march forward against racism. This is exactly where Martin Luther King Jr. got his inspiration from, because one woman knew that she knew in her small way she can make a difference. You're not called upon to change the whole world, but to do something. You see, President Nelson Mandela left a brilliant legal career, went into the streets to cause change. He said in one of his statements, "Sometimes it behoves a generation to be great. You can be that generation." I ask you tonight, will you be that generation? What a shame for you or me or anyone to ever quote these great leaders and do nothing about it. I request you, I beseech you, never quote any of them if you're just seated watching the political landscape unfolding. You have no moral right to quote those names. If Mandela rose up from his grave, he would tell you exactly what I've told you. Go soil your hands and cause the change. So today, I want to suggest what I think you can do towards peaceful elections in Kenya in 2017. And I'll start with anyone in our midst, or wherever they are, anyone who will ever listen to this recording. But you're police, you're in the military, you're in the CID, you're in the intelligence, or our security organs. I salute you tonight. We honor you. You sacrifice for us. You lay down your lives for us. You have families like us, sometimes we neglect. And sometimes we have not compensated you for what you deserve. But truth be told, sometimes out of your own fears and inadequacies, you have made the wrong choices. There has been a lapse in your judgment. You see, an unfit police is twice as likely to shoot you down than a one who is physically fit. But we also recognize you've inherited a system that requires you not to question orders, to take them as given. I urge you, wherever you could be hearing my voice, in these elections, don't sniff away any single life, any innocent life, even as you try to honor the oath you took and the allegiance you swore. When you shoot down a protester, a poor mother goes to bury her son, at times an only son, at times an only breadwinner. In Sense 1 Life Club, we are not against police. We are anti-police brutality, killing in cold blood. History teaches with unmistakable emphasis, violence calls for more violence. Blood calls for more bloodshed. When you shoot down an innocent protester, they now prepare for more violence. Would you want to be remembered by how many people you killed or how many people you saved? Violence kills what it was meant to protect. So we urge you tonight, please take your work with the sacredness it deserves and the sanctity of life. Seek to protect, not to kill. And to our judiciary, We live in a country whereby only appointed officers are supposed to interpret what justice means. Laypersons like me and you are supposed to assume every judgment made in the courts of law is Solomonic wisdom. You see, in a kingdom, the king decides what justice is. In a democracy like Kenya, our appointed judges decide what justice is. Then how ironical it is for the same judges to pretend there is manipulation from the executive. I know that was the case for many years, but I beg to differ with the promulgation of Constitution of Kenya 2010. I submit tonight that what we're lacking in this nation is judicial leadership. We have a situation whereby the judges watch political campaigns from a distance just to wait for the electoral disputes. You see, we act in a disjointed, mechanical manner dealing with national issues. I challenge the judiciary, wherever they are, whoever can hear our voice, this is the high time you went into the streets and corrected public perception about the judiciary. It is time you got out of your offices and courtrooms and reassure the country that we can peg our trusts in our courts. What we need in Kenya are not more electioneering laws. What we need in Kenya is justice. Kenya does not need more charity. Kenya needs justice. Where justice is denied, poverty is entrenched. Ignorance prevails. Where one class of people is made to feel like the society is a conspiracy to rob, oppress, and degrade them, then neither persons nor property will ever be safe. While equality will never be achieved, equity must never be compromised. I suggest our judges need to transform our courts of laws to courts of justice. In Kenya, justice has been incidental to law and order. But at the long run, the only way to achieve sustainable peace is where justice guarantees law and order. When we reward effort in politics, in business, and in career, then we attain national stability. What we need in this nation is judicial leadership towards electioneering processes. And this takes me to the role of the legislature. With the bicameral parliament in Kenya today, we've never had such a bloated parliament. Regrettably, only a few parliamentarians are awake to their duty. And what we are seeing from the main presidential contenders, none of them seems to be willing to concede. And I challenge our MPs to look at any loophole in electioneering for possibilities of legislation and fix it beforehand. And then demand presidential candidates to make public commitments before they are cleared by IEBC that they will accept the results and the verdict of the voters as announced by the referee, IEBC. But the real question tonight, can we trust our MPs to help us not to change goalposts in the middle of the game, when they themselves have been specialists of changing goalposts? It will never be lost in the mind of Kenyans that the 11th Parliament, and in particular the National Assembly, bullied her way into unregulated income and threatened to disband SRC, the Salary and Remuneration Commission. You have contributed to the inequalities in this nation, and therefore you've been a threat to national peace. I tell you as MPs tonight, the God of all justice will not always be impatient with legislative injustice. And this takes me to the role of the executive towards a peaceful election in Kenya. And maybe I should first say, all the governors and the CECs many times behave like they are part of the opposition and they are part of the executive in the counties where they hail from. But first, as Sense on One Life Club, we said our condolences to the constituents of Nyeri County, and in particular the family of the late Honorable Derito Gachagua, for the demise of their governor, their father, and their county fellow men. But we have a word for the president of this nation. Mr. President, we recognize the role you played, your utter determination and relentless effort to move Kenya forward. As we congratulate you, we must also note that runaway corruption has reached an all-time high in this nation. Some of us suspect that the major reason this has happened is that, Mr. President, you've been preoccupied with 2017 elections throughout your presidency, and therefore no one around you could be held liable and accountable for runaway corruption. Mr. President, I remind you tonight, while many politicians around the world focus on the next election, great leaders focus on the next generation. While all of us as the country, individually, corporate, the business sector, are responsible for a great nation, Mr. President, the buck stops with you. In essence, what this means, security in Kenya, food, economy, health, and a peaceful transition from power to the next leaders, a peaceful election, are all squarely on your two shoulders. That's the job you applied for. President Harry S. Truman in 1945, when he took over the oath of office, the first thing he did is to put a sign on his office saying, "The buck stops here." I take full responsibility. There is no blame game. We can't have a situation where the president blames anyone for corruption or for insecurity. That said, Mr. President, let me assure you that majority of Kenyans pray for you daily. God's favor rests on you. Don't disappoint him. This takes me to the role of our opposition leaders. The tremendous job they have done is undeniable. The opposition leadership in Kenya has put the government on its toes. They have saved this nation millions of shillings, and they have raised the conscience of the government of the day. We congratulate them. Perhaps we should have renamed opposition leadership to alternative leadership. Because right now, we have a scenario where some opposition leaders oppose anything government, almost every single policy. They fight every nice idea, some of them. And we wish to remind them, you'll never be remembered by what you destroy. You'll be remembered by what you build. We challenge our opposition leadership to be grounded firmly on convictions rather than mere power games. We urge our opposition leaders to reach out to the executive and find out whether there can be a common ground during this election. We refuse to believe that we have an unreachable executive in Kenya today. Any inability to reach out to the executive is not structural, but egos, male egos. We need to let them down and allow the country to reign. We urge our opposition leaders to reach out to their supporters and assure them there is a fair ground for the sake of the greater good. Where your personal ambitions compromise the national good, we urge you let go your personal ambitions. What is true for our opposition leaders is also true for the executive. Do not allow your personal interests compromise millions of lives and properties and destroy dreams of our children. And not only to opposition leadership, but to all those who are aspiring for elective positions. Do not harm your opponents. This is somebody's father. This is somebody's mother. This is somebody with dependence on them. Why become a tool of the enemy in destroying them? Focus on your manifesto and how to reinvent yourself, to repackage yourself and sell yourself, rather than focusing on your opponent's strategies. To the civil society, you played a major role in Kenya in enhancing the democratic space. You've kept the executive on check and balance. You've interrogated the operations of the legislature. You've checked the execution of justice by the judiciary. You've educated a nation on civil rights. We are better off with your interventions. But some elements amongst you have been puppets of foreign manipulation at the expense of our homeland. Some because of personal gains, but others because of foreign interest. Most of you in the civil society derive your inspiration from Martin Luther King Jr. Let me remind you that Martin Luther's dream was anchored on the American dream. He was true to his identity. He never betrayed who he was. You must remember you are Kenyans first. You must never betray that cause. Where your interventions compromise the national good, please let go the foreign interest. Do not be used in the disguise of civil works to cause mayhem in this nation. Some of you have even gone to our schools, sneaked in their selfish agenda to corrupt the minds of our young children. Please understand, there is no other place on this planet you can have a permanent citizenship except your homeland. Put your country first. Honor Kenya first. To the working class majority who are in this live audience, let me tell you this. We have a number of Kenyans who don't need to work for a single day. Their investments offshore can sustain them for their entire life. Many of them are decent Kenyans, but some of them can burn the nation and leave. You know, the central bank only guarantees 100,000 in respect to your deposit, and the reason is simple. Because 94% of Kenyans do not have any consistent deposits of more than 100,000 shillings. That tells you 94% of Kenyans cannot live a normal life for 6 months if we went into flames. 6 years ago, Syria went into flames. Russia and China have refused to sign sanctions against the Assad regime. Meanwhile, 450,000 lives have been lost, and 50% of pre-war Syria's population, 12 million in absolute numbers, are now scattered all over Europe and Middle East. In the meantime, President Assad is enjoying the goodies of State House. Neither side is concerned with civilian casualties. This has happened to many nations. Our immediate neighbor has been like that for over 3 decades. Don't be cheated that this cannot happen in Kenya. We haven't known, some of you, since the day you were born, we haven't known a stable Somali. And an unstable Somali has been a threat to the stability of Kenya. While you want to avoid getting into the murky waters of politics, I still want to remind you the words of Martin Niemöller. During the Second World War, he said, that I quote, "Evil prevails when good people do nothing about it." They came for the socialist, and I didn't speak because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionist, and I didn't speak because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak on my behalf. End of quote. If you try to navigate through this life on a safe itinerary, you'll always bear the burdens of a corrupt government and failed structures. This country rides on your back. It is built on the back of the working class. I urge you to reach out to your neighbors and send this peace message. I urge you to desist from political undertones in your places of work. I urge you to reach out to our youth in your neighborhoods, in your churches, in the villages where you come from, and reason with them, peace at all costs. And to the business community that is here tonight or will ever listen to this video recording, I believe there is something you can do in this election. I believe you can play a lead role in shaping the model of a nation. Safaricom in particular has tried to shape the driving behavior and even the pedestrian behavior of their employees. And I believe this has cut down road carnage in Kenya. We can borrow a leaf from that and apply it in every facet of our nation's history. As a business community. Refuse to employ people just from your community. Integrate Kenyans in that place based on meritocracy. As a business community, organize weekly meetings, reason with your employees on what must we do to ensure a peaceful election. As a business community, sponsor some adverts on our TV, saturate the airwaves with messages of peace, sponsor caravans of peace, peace walks. Let's see people get into the streets as part of your corporate social responsibility. I know in the medium term and long term, the stability and success of your business depends on the political stability of your immediate environment. To our young men and women, our youth, university students, now you are young adults. You are entitled to universal suffrage. Let your voices be heard through the ballot box. When you fail to vote, you get the government that you deserve. Admittedly, at times after you vote, you do not get the results you expected. This then should tell you some of the politicians are just having a rhetoric. They don't mean what they say. Which then begs the big question. Why harm someone playing as a pawn in someone's chess game and then deliver victory to the king on bloody hands for peanuts in return? Suppose in this election we realize that the two kings will still dine together and they will ride on your back irrespective of who carries the flag home. Suppose in this election you reached out to fellow students in colleges and universities every single week and make some forums, come up with strategies on how to reach out to the youths from wherever you come from. Suppose in this election you decided as youth groups to go to Kibera and Mathare North and Mukuru and Kayole and Kawangware and Kangemi, and let the youth know they are not communities that are competing for elective posts, it's individuals. Suppose you reasoned with them. Don't underestimate your personal effort. Change is a question of our cumulative efforts. And to our media, we congratulate you for the role you've played in expanding the democratic space in Kenya. In the year 2003, you launched a spirited campaign for a peaceful election. But every so often, we see greed and the need for money leading you to what you publish. And every piece of media you publish has far-reaching ramifications. The consuming audience does not interpret your business model. They consume every piece of media as given. You've got to recognize you're the pace setters. You're the agenda setters. Suppose we restructured our approach to media. Suppose we began selling positive data in this country. You engage more in R&D. You black out incitement. And you start reshaping a culture. Believe me, Kenyans will still buy positive media. You can choose transformation over prostitution. Whoever makes money at the expense of conscience is a moral failure. And I believe together we can make a difference. And finally, to the religious community, you are the moral leaders and the moral custodians of a nation. In 1,000 years, I'll never understand how people who sought refuge in a church, Kiaba Church, were burned alive in a church. Where were the moral leaders of that community? Where did the fear and the sacredness of the house of God go? Has some of us been tempted to preach what the itching ears of the political class want to hear? Have some of us baptized for a pay? Have some of us preached for a pay slip? Somewhere I read, if my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face, then will I hear them from heaven and heal their land. 2 Chronicles 7:14. Somewhere I read, pray for your leaders that you may live a peaceful life. 1 Timothy 2:2. What can the church do? What role can the church play? Pray. Pray for the nation and become role models. When you fight frequent conflicts, wars, and rumors of war, I suggest to the church leaders, it is time you sow it in light of biblical prophecy and take advantage and introduce them to the Prince of Peace. If each one of us does our duty, if we all play our role, then we shall achieve in this land and the world over the ancient vision of peace on earth and goodwill toward all men. And someday, the Prince of Peace will establish eternal peace on this planet. Thank you very much, and God bless you. God bless Kenya. Thank you.